President Obama addresses the nation.
You and I, as citizens, have the power to set this country's course.
2013 was a bad year for the president. Will his State of the Union kick off a better midterm year? Time will bring it to you live with insight and context like no one else. Join the journalists you've come to trust for the president's speech and the opposition's response. Live from Time, the State of the Union address. Now here's Mark Halperin.
Welcome to Time's special coverage of President Obama's State of the Union address. For the next 2.5 hours or so, we'll bring you something brand new. This is the first instance in the long fabled history of Time magazine where we're doing a live anchored event, in this case, President Obama's address to the nation. That'll begin in just about 15 minutes at around 9 Eastern Time. We're going to take you live to the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. You see there the House chamber, members and others arriving to see President Obama speak to what will be a sizable national and international audience to try to lay out in an effective way his agenda for 2014. Last year was in many ways the most frustrating of Mr. Obama's 2 terms. He came off his convincing re-election expecting some of Washington's gridlock at least to come unstuck. Instead, it was a year where very little got done in the Capitol, and people around the country have noticed for sure both parties are now suffering with low approval ratings, but it's the president's decline and the question of whether tonight can begin a bit of a comeback that's at the center of the political discussion in and about the United States right now. So for analysis and discussion of the president's address and a little later, the Republican response, I'm joined here in New York by several of my colleagues. I want to first bring in you, Michael Shear, our Washington bureau chief. The White House, as is their custom, released some excerpts a little bit earlier today from the president's remark. I want to focus on the ones that are pretty central to what we expect him to say tonight. One of the excerpts says, massive shifts in technology and global competition have eliminated a lot of good middle-class jobs and weakened the economic foundations that families depend on. Upward mobility has stalled. The cold, hard fact is that even in the midst of recovery, too many Americans are working more than ever just to get by, let alone get ahead. So talk about this theme of framing the economic challenge as the president sees it.
Sure. Close watchers of President Obama's rhetoric may feel like they've heard that before, and that's because they have heard it before. It's a paraphrase of a dozen Obama speeches that he's given over the year, and it's an attempt to return us back to the campaign themes that won him the 2012 election, the sense that for most middle-class Americans are working harder and harder just to get by, and that the deal, the American deal that the president likes to talk about, has become more difficult. I think it's trying to pivot away from 2013, from the talk of Obamacare, from the frustrations, to what Obama knows works with the American people, to feel their frustrations.
Okay, a second excerpt dealing less with diagnosing the problem than what the president proposes to do. The president's expected to say, what I offer tonight is a set of concrete, practical proposals to speed up growth, strengthen the middle class, and build new ladders of opportunity into the middle class. Some require congressional action, and I'm eager to work with all of you, but really, wherever and whenever I can take steps without legislation to expand opportunity for more American families, that's what I'm going to do. Another thing that was widely telegraphed and previewed, this notion of, if he can't get Congress to act, executive action.
Again, it's not the first time he's doing this, but it's a response to the White House frustration in 2013 that Obama once again appeared for the American people to be captured by Washington, to be more of a prime minister than a president. They want to reestablish him going into this year as someone who can take control of the narrative, can take control of the country, and can convince the American people again that he actually has the ability to do stuff for them. And right now they don't really feel that.
One more line I want to read, another excerpt, some lofty rhetoric, the kind the president sometimes shies away from, but which he is ironically known for. The president's expected to say, opportunity is who we are, and the defining project of our generation is to restore that promise. Well, clearly the economy is going to be front and center tonight, so also as part of our discussion this evening, our assistant managing editor in charge of business and economics, Rana Foroohar. Rana, what do you expect? What are you looking for? What's the context?
Thanks, Mark. I think it's going to be all about wages tonight. You know, we're in a recovery. Unemployment has been ticking down, but wages are flat. Most people are not feeling this recovery, and that's been the case for several years now. So how do you get wages up? I think you're going to hear the president talk about raising the minimum wage. That would certainly help the working poor. I think you're going to hear him talk a lot about retooling the American workforce. We have jobs, but oftentimes workers don't have the right skills. That's going to mean reinventing secondary education and giving broader access to college, and particularly community college. I think you're also going to hear about manufacturing and creating those well-paying middle market jobs. And I hope that we're going to hear something about tax reform and entitlement reform, because in order to get businesses spending again, we're going to need to address those two things.
Is the private sector looking to this speech, to Washington in general this year, or have they given up and sort of baking gridlock into the cake of their expectations?
I think they are watching. They really are watching. They think that the fiscal headwinds, as the Fed likes to call them, are really on the downswing. And I think that they're looking now to see what is the president going to do? Is the president going to make America a place that they want to invest? There's $2 trillion on businesses' balance sheets, and they really do want to start spending it.
Probably the world economy. What are they looking at for the United States? How important an economic recovery here for the world?
Well, it's a very, very important for the rest of the world. The State of the Union has a very big bearing on the state of the world. So a lot of world leaders, business leaders, economists, even a collection of bad guys around the world will be listening very closely to the president's speech. They will be listening also for foreign policy to get a sense of where the president is on foreign policy. And this is an area where he has traditionally been weak. He's not comfortable with foreign affairs. He's often been clumsy. All kinds of people have done end runs around him, from Bibi Netanyahu to Bashar Assad and, of course, Putin of Russia. So the president in the last year has tried to, you've heard a lot of talk of the Asian pivot. There's been an attempt to take the focus of foreign policy away from the Middle East into China, Japan, the South China Sea. But ironically, the three things that people will be looking to hear from him internationally have to do with the Middle East and the greater Middle East. They are Syria. Does he have something new to offer there after the disaster of the Red Lines last year? I don't think he'll be using that expression this year. Afghanistan, where the troop withdrawal, American troop withdrawal, will accelerate this year. What happens afterwards? Will the president say how badly, how important it is for American soldiers to remain in Afghanistan? Can he sell that to a country that is very tired of war? And finally, of course, Iran, the temporary deal that freezes Iran's nuclear ambitions for 6 months runs out this summer. What happens after that? How important is it to get a permanent deal? What is the president willing to give? What does he think the Iranians are willing to give in exchange? And those are the three crucial issues that the president, I hope, will address. And I think that's what foreign policy experts around the world will be listening for.
Okay, Bobby Ghosh, I should have properly introduced our international editor. Thank you for that. Most of the telegraphing early on about the speech is that we don't expect a lot on international affairs. The sort of history is presidents in their second terms, frustrated by Congress, as this one is, move towards thinking more about international affairs. When we think about the president, legacy, his time, do you expect him to spend more time there?
I think you will see him traveling more over the next 3 years than he did last year. But this speech, I don't think he is focused on that. I mean, this is a campaign year, and so this State of the Union will be very much like the 2012 State of the Union. He is going to lay out the argument for the American people for why basically the Senate should remain in Democratic hands, which is that the Democrats actually understand the concerns of working people, of the struggles the American people are feeling, and that on foreign affairs, Obama is fulfilling the promises he made when he came into office.
I think you may also hear something about trade, though, too. Sure. And, you know, what we're doing with China, we have an opportunity right now to cut new trade deals with both Asia and Europe. And I think that the president is hoping that that's going to really spur some job creation, particularly in the export sector.
But what we know about these speeches is these are not speeches in which he is going to move votes in the Congress. I mean, no matter what he says about trade, doesn't make getting trade promotion authority that much easier. No matter what he said last year about guns, didn't make getting a vote on background checks any easier. So there's a limit to how much he can really push the people in the room. What he can do is push the American people and get the conversation back onto turf where he feels more comfortable.
Okay, I want to talk a little bit about the context of the speech, and one big way that we track things here at Time has to do with the context in social media. State of the Union is certainly going to stir things up, particularly on Twitter. That's where a lot of this stuff gets tracked now. So also joining us this evening there at the end of the table, our Director of Digital Innovation, Callie Schweitzer. Callie, lots of every live event gets tweeted now. How big has the president been as a tweet inspirer in the State of the Union speeches of recent years?
The president has been huge. Between 2012 and 2013, there was a 50% increase in the number of tweets sent between the beginning of the president's speech and the end of the Republican response. Last year, 2013, saw 1.3 million tweets alone. I expect this year will be even bigger.
Now, those are tweets using the hashtag SOTU, so there are probably many more people not tweeting with the hashtag. Now, that increase, you know, 2012 was the beginning of a presidential year, 2013, right after. Do you attribute that increase to more people on Twitter, greater interest than last year? What would you say?
I would say both. More people on Twitter and greater interest in what the president has to say. I also think the fact that now 100% of the Senate, 97% of the House, and Twitter exclusively confirmed to me last night that 50 governors out of 50 states are all on Twitter as well. People are creating conversation around the State of the Union in a way that they weren't before.
Right. So how does the State of the Union compare? I think we've got a graphic talking about this. How does the State of the Union compare to other big events, political and non-political, in terms of Twitter activity?
It's no Super Bowl, which usually leads to 24.1 million tweets, as it did last year. 5.5 million of those were Beyonce's halftime show alone. So President Obama, not quite as popular as Beyonce. But in terms of political events, it's also on the small side. The presidential debate of the final one of 2012 itself saw 6.6 million tweets. So again, it is small, but still very important and much talked about.
White House has been more aggressive in using social media around build up to this State of the Union than any event I think that we've seen. That's increasingly common. Does the White House doing that drive traffic? Is that why they do it, to get the message out, or to drive the multiplier effect of even more?
It's both. Anytime President Obama is on Vine promoting his State of the Union speech, people are talking. I think that the White House wants to be at the center of the conversation, but they also just want to be a part of it, and they're inspiring other people to get in on it as well. Okay,
Kelly, thank you. We're about 5 minutes away from what we expect to be the president's arrival into the House chamber. We'll bring you that with all the usual stops and starts, hugging and kissing and macho talk. But I want to get one last little bit of wisdom from our Washington bureau chief here, Michael Shearer, about what you expect tonight, what you're looking for in the context of the president's address.
Thanks, Mark. State of the Union, the power of a State of the Union can be measured with two numbers: the popularity of the president and the number of people who tune in. And on both measures, it's almost certain that tonight will be the least influential of the State of the Unions that President Obama has already delivered. He started in 2009 with well more than 50 million viewers, his first joint address to Congress. Last year, he only had 33 million viewers on television for the State of the Union. He started well over 50%. He was even over 50% in most polls when he gave the State of the Union last year. This year, he is down in the low 40s, the lowest of any modern president, with the exception of his immediate predecessor, George W. Bush. So given his limitations, what can Obama accomplish tonight? I think what he will be focused on is some of what we've talked about so far, which is really telegraphing to the American people the issues he wants to be talking about. It's still an enormous bully pulpit. It will still capture news cycles, not just tonight, but for weeks to come as he travels around the country. And he can at least start the year starting the conversation on ground that is friendly for Democrats and friendly for him, that will put pressure on Republicans over issues like the minimum wage.
Michael, thank you. So now we're looking, you see there the hall and the arrivals. Just a little while ago, you saw in the larger box the First Lady of the United States greeting Joe Biden's wife, Jill Biden, the name of the wife of the vice president. Often much debated what title she gets, Second Lady or whatever it is. But and there, of course, Vice President Biden, Speaker Boehner, waiting for the president's arrival. And we'll see a series, again, of those of you who've watched these before, a series of the pomp and circumstance of the president's announcement, et cetera. So we're going to talk for a bit more while we wait for the arrival, and we'll break our discussion so you can hear some of that formal pomp and circumstance. Again, you're watching Time Magazine, Time.com's coverage of the State of the Union. President Obama trying to kick off 2014 and make it for him politically and for the country a better year than 2013 was. Bobby, let me ask you, you mentioned some of the hot spots around the world, and we know that there'll be very little. Hold on one moment. Let me stop for a moment. So one thing people are going to be looking for here is how many of the justices attend. We've seen in the past year a drop-off in attendance, so we'll count them here. They're not quite dwarfs or munchkins or anything, but we'll count how many we see. And the arrival, there's the Chief Justice, Justice Roberts leading the way. Are any of the justices on Twitter? I would doubt it.
I would love to know also the 3% of members of Congress who aren't on Twitter.
They should be out.
Now, so far, I do not see Justice Scalia or Justice Thomas. I think those are the ones that I didn't see go by, but otherwise, a fair number. Anyway, picking back up our discussion, Bobby, you talked about the fact we don't expect the president to talk much about foreign affairs, and there's so many hot spots now. I think as many as we've seen since the president was in office, so many different parts of the world where there are real burning issues.
Well, yes, 2013 was the year that Al-Qaeda made a big resurgence in Syria, in Iraq, and other parts of the world. Now, these are franchises of Al-Qaeda, and they don't directly threaten the United States or the Western world at the moment. But if they're allowed to thrive in these environments, then the risk is that months from now, or even maybe a few years from now, some of these Al-Qaeda leaders will begin to get more ambitious and begin to target Western countries. So this is a big challenge. A president who's not comfortable with foreign policy, a president who does not want to get the United States involved in any more wars, has to deal with this rising threat of an old familiar enemy. How do you do that? Do you do that with drones? Another thing we've seen in 2013 and the years before is how unpopular that is. And there's a considerable body of research now that says drone strikes help to further the cause of Al-Qaeda rather than eliminate it. So these are challenges that modern presidents, modern leaders across Europe and here in the US face. But this president, who is so reluctant in these areas, has to deal with them and has to sell them to an American population that does not want to hear of any kind of foreign engagements anymore. That's a huge challenge, and I doubt very much that he'll want to go too deep into that in this speech. But it is something that hangs in sort of in the background of every foreign policy that he attempts, particularly in the Middle East.
Okay, we just saw the arrival and a big round of applause, as usual, for the First Lady of the United States entering her box. I aired before and saying she'd already arrived, and let's listen now for the next set of announcements.
Speaker, the President's Cabinet.
So here comes the Cabinet, a lot of familiar faces and some unfamiliar ones. Here, there's John Kerry, of course, the Secretary of State, one of the more prominent members, and Jack Lew, who had been the White House Chief of Staff, now the Treasury Secretary. Michael Shearer, I'm sure you know the answer to this. The parlor game that fascinates at least Washington, and I'm sure a lot of people on Twitter. Who is the Cabinet Secretary not present tonight who, in the event of a horrible mishap, would take control of everything?
The Cabinet Secretary with the best hair in the Cabinet, Secretary of Energy, Ernest Maurice.
Maurice. John Kerry would be annoyed to hear you say
No,
that.
no, John Kerry may have had the best hair until we got a new energy secretary.
Now, I have to say, I probably could pick that Cabinet Secretary out of a lineup, but he's probably not the most prominent member of the Cabinet.
The Secretary of Energy actually often gets stuck with the short end of the stick.
Yeah,
with these.
missing the speech.
It's a popular choice. I think if you go back over the years, it's a very common one.
So there is Elliot Engel, we saw briefly there. We'll talk about him perhaps later. There's Michelle Bachmann. As I said, John Kerry, Jack Lew. On the right there, Chuck Hagel, the Secretary of Defense. That's Eric Holder, the Attorney General. And the Cabinet in this administration, not considered particularly powerful or prominent. So there's Elliot Engel again. Tell us the story, Michael Shearer, of Elliot Engel and what his deal is.
He's not as...
Congressman from New York.
Congressman from New York, not quite as ambitious around cameras as Michelle Bachmann, but particularly ambitious when it comes to State of the Unions. To get in the aisle, you have to show up several hours in advance.
It's like festival seating at a Rolling Stones concert.
That's right. You have to camp
first
outside.
Come, first serve.
You have to camp outside.
And he likes his aisle seat.
Year in, year out, he's always there.
Yeah.
And I actually am surprised to see Bachmann there. I mean, we know she's retiring, but she loves being in front of the cameras. So, and I'm sure she'll be in front of the cameras even after she retires.
So there are the justices. Now, can anyone help me out with, am I right that there are 7 of the 9 there?
Couldn't count them.
Is that right? Maybe if we get that shot again, we can see. So there's Tom Vilsack, the blue striped tie Secretary of Agriculture. Again, this procession will take a while as the Cabinet stops and shakes hands along the aisleways to talk to different people, and the President will do much the same thing. Ron, I want to ask you, we've seen several shots of Jack Lew, the Treasury Secretary. What is the verdict on him these days? Obviously, he's following Tim Geithner, who had mixed reviews, but had experience in New York, was head of the Fed here. Jack Lew has a New York background, but how does the business community feel about him? How do international markets feel about him so far?
I think he's considered a safe pair of hands. He was definitely an insider. He was not somebody that was going to be tough on the banks. He was not a reformer. I think a lot of folks that did want more financial reform were hoping that someone like Gary Gensler might have gotten that job. But basically, his job is to deal with the budget, to deal with wrangling Congress, and I don't think that we're going to see anything new. We're not going to see a lot of movement around financial reform. I think that he's been fairly proactive on trade, but again, there's a lot of conflict right now, so I think he's got his hands full dealing with domestic issues.
Okay, there's Peter King, Congressman from New York. saw there a good example of the many faces of Peter King frown to very quick smile in short succession.
Another
so
one
that
that never
was,
shines
that
from
was
the camera.
that was as if on cue. There's the Secretary of Housing and Urban Development, Sean Donovan, and Arnie Duncan. There is, I would say, the woman of 2013 and maybe 2014, the Secretary of Health and Human Services, Kathleen Sebelius.
Still very much employed.
Still very much employed and very much with the president's trust. We don't expect him to talk much about the Affordable Care Act. He'll talk some, but not very much.
I think that's right. I mean, one of the big macro strategic goals of the White House here is to get us off of Obamacare, because Republicans have decided, probably correctly, that if they can keep the country talking about Obamacare through September and November, they have a very good chance of taking the Senate. Obama needs to move us back as a country to issues that are friendlier for Democrats. The issue of signing up, the issue of the website, is basically on automatic pilot at this point. There's not a lot more presidential communication that needs to happen. It's going to be a slightly disappointing number, but it's not going to undo the Obamacare program. But the anger in the country about how the president sold the program, whether he sold it honestly, whether it's still something that the country needs right now, is very real and could be very damaging to Democrats.
Where do they hope to get to politically on the issue of health care by the midterm elections?
That Obamacare is basically working. They want the story to be, it's basically a good thing. Almost everybody who's dealt with it is actually getting a better deal than they expected they'd get. People aren't losing coverage. People aren't paying for things they don't want. And that it actually has fulfilled the promise that Democrats have been selling now for 4 or 5 years, that made American people's lives better. But it's a long process, and it may not actually be there by then.
Bobby, let me ask you the same question about John Kerry, and we see Susan Rice there, the president's national security advisor, and Chuck Hagel, Secretary of Defense. Their overseas international constituencies, how are they being judged, relatively new to the jobs, in terms of credibility of America, partners for our allies, and people our enemies have to contend with as well?
Well, John Kerry is a very familiar figure around the world because he, of course, ran for president, and in that entire cycle, people around the world got familiar with him, not least because he was on the cover of Time magazine. And he has considerable international experience, both from having been a veteran of the Vietnam War, but also have been in the Foreign Relations Committee. He's very well traveled. So he's a very familiar face, and because of the heft that he carries in the Senate, he carries a lot of credibility internationally as well. We saw the exact same thing with Hillary Clinton. Well, he can't hide the fact, though, that he's working for a president for whom this is not a very big sort of priority, foreign policy. It gives him room to maneuver. So he's taken the lead on things like the Mideast peace talks between the Israelis and Palestinians without a great deal of interference from the president. But at the same time, when it comes to actually delivering on something, does he have the president at his back? That's not been clear. I don't think that was clear when Hillary Clinton was Secretary of State, and that's not clear with John Kerry either.
And what about Secretary Hagel at the Pentagon? How is he viewed?
Again, he's sort of a familiar figure, but America's presence militarily in the world is shrinking. A lot of America's allies look upon that with alarm, and they would like to see Chuck Hagel sort of more frequently as a visitor bearing gifts of a military nature. But there is an alarm, particularly in the Far East, in the South China Sea, where China and to some degree Japan are becoming more and more forceful militarily. There is an appetite, there is a desire to see a larger American military presence there, and there's quite a lot of fear that this administration is pulling away from that.
So there's in the center there, in that nice yellow and blue tie, Joe Manchin, the senator from West Virginia. This is kind of like Washington's bad, awkward cocktail party moment. A lot of milling around, waiting for the arrival of the president. Some genuine hugs and people glad to see each other, but a lot of waiting. And I would say Joe Biden and John Boehner do not look the happiest I've ever seen them there while they wait for the president's arrival. A little bit awkward for them standing there. There's the gavel from the speaker. Let's see. I think we're going to get the president short, the announcement of the president.
Mr. Speaker, the President of the United States.
So if you like Washington pageantry and ritual, get ready. We got a couple of minutes of it coming up here. The president's going to work his way through. Lots of hugs, kisses, the pointing. Nothing better than that presidential point. And lots of pats right behind him. Eric Cantor, Republican leader in the House, and Harry Reid there, the Democratic leader in the Senate, kind of the party coming in with the president. And this process will take a while, so settle in and enjoy the semiotics and the body language as the president greets people along the aisle.
I have to say, for the international audience, this is part of the enjoyment of it. I've been in many countries in the world where the head of state has given the annual speech, whether it's on Independence Day, Republic Day, or a day of, that is important to their countries. And it tends to be very stilted, very formal. This shaking of hands and pointing of fingers is a sort of this bonhomie, probably fake, but nonetheless, the fact that they take the effort to show it is part of the enjoyment of it. Long before I came to this country, I watched a succession of American presidents walk through this line, and I remember thinking that seemed like a very warm thing to do, to stop and shake hands and acknowledge friends and probably smile at souls as well.
We just saw the moment that President Obama was waiting all year for, him greeting everyone.
Yeah, the big handshake. There he is with Tim Kaine, very close to the president, senator from Virginia, former governor. And I don't mean to sound cynical or dismissive of this. I love this ritual. And there are some moments you can see the president not thought of generally as a great backslapper, but now literally slapping some backs as he makes his way up to give the speech. And you know, it is one of the few times where you see the president with Eric Cantor behind him, probably one of his staunchest critics in the whole Congress, Republican, also from Virginia, very conservative and very critical of Obamacare and the president's past accomplishments and future aspirations, and yet here they are in one of our rituals, arriving together in a very warm and friendly way. And you see Eric Cantor stopping and talking to a lot of the same Democrats and greeting them warmly, people who in the normal course of business probably don't get quite as wide a smile from the gentleman from Virginia.
Obama looks incredibly energized.
He does. I totally agree.
He's not much of a backslapper by nature, but when he has to do it, he's quite able.
Yep.
But he just doesn't enjoy it.
Yeah.
So
for those of you watching, perhaps overseas, not familiar with this, there's the president with Ruth Bader Ginsburg and the other justices of the Supreme Court, Stephen Breyer and Elena Kagan, who worked in the White House. This is part of the ritual here, is that audience is filled not just with members of Congress and the president's cabinet, but as you can see, the Joint Chiefs we saw earlier, the members of the Supreme Court. There are also members of the diplomatic corps who have seats there, not up front, but they're in the hall as well. And I've been in the chamber for 2 of these, and it is quite a night of pageantry, and there is something special about everybody being gathered in one place to listen to the president lay out, again, his aspirations for the country and the world and for himself politically in this important year. Shakes hands with the Vice President, John Boehner, big smile for the Speaker, and some words that some lip reader somewhere will capture and have on Twitter, probably instantly. And now we'll watch the president shake hands around one final round and get up there. And you think we're going to get underway, but I will not be fooled. I've seen this before. The president will be introduced and we'll have another round of applause. And then before too long, we'll actually get to hear from the president.
Members of Congress, I have the high privilege and distinct honor of presenting to you the President of the United States. Thank you. Thank you.
Easiest standing ovation anybody gets anywhere.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. Mr. Speaker, Mr. Vice President, members of Congress, my fellow Americans. Today in America, a teacher spent extra time with a student who needed it,
and did her part to lift America's graduation rate to its highest levels in more than 3 decades. An entrepreneur flipped on the lights in her tech startup and did her part to add to the more than 8 million new jobs our businesses have created over the past 4 years. An auto worker fine-tuned some of the best, most fuel-efficient cars in the world and did his part to help America wean itself off foreign oil. A farmer prepared for the spring after the strongest 5-year stretch of farm exports in our history. A rural doctor gave a young child the first prescription to treat asthma that his mother could afford. A man took the bus home from the graveyard shift, bone-tired, but dreaming big dreams for his son. And in tight-knit communities all across America, fathers and mothers will tuck in their kids, put an arm around their spouse, remember fallen comrades, and give thanks for being home from a war that after 12 long years is finally coming to an end. Tonight, this chamber speaks with one voice to the people we represent. It is you, our citizens, who make the state of our union strong. And here are the results of your efforts. The lowest unemployment rate in over 5 years, a rebounding housing market, a manufacturing sector that's adding jobs for the first time since the 1990s, more oil produced at home than we buy from the rest of the world, the first time that's happened in nearly 20 years. Our deficits cut by more than half. And for the first time in over a decade, business leaders around the world have declared that China is no longer the world's #1 place to invest. America is. That's why I believe this can be a breakthrough year for America. After 5 years of grit and determined effort, the United States is better positioned for the 21st century than any other nation on earth. The question for everyone in this chamber, running through every decision we make this year, is whether we are going to help or hinder this progress. For several years now, this town has been consumed by a rancorous argument over the proper size of the federal government. It's an important debate, one that dates back to our very founding. But when that debate prevents us from carrying out even the most basic functions of our democracy, when our differences shut down government or threaten the full faith and credit of the United States, then we are not doing right by the American people. Now, as president, I'm committed to making Washington work better and rebuilding the trust of the people who sent us here. And I believe most of you are too. Last month, thanks to the work of Democrats and Republicans, Congress finally produced a budget that undoes some of last year's severe cuts to priorities like education. Nobody got everything they wanted, and we can still do more to invest in this country's future while bringing down our deficit in a balanced way. But the budget compromise should leave us freer to focus on creating new jobs, not creating new crises. And in the coming months, let's see where else we can make progress together. Let's make this a year of action. That's what most Americans want. For all of us in this chamber to focus on their lives, their hopes, their aspirations. And what I believe unites the people of this nation, regardless of race or region or party, young or old, rich or poor, is the simple, profound belief in opportunity for all. The notion that if you work hard and take responsibility, you can get ahead in America. Now, let's face it, that belief has suffered some serious blows. Over more than 3 decades, even before the Great Recession hit, massive shifts in technology and global competition had eliminated a lot of good middle-class jobs and weakened the economic foundations that families depend on. Today, after 4 years of economic growth, corporate profits and stock prices have rarely been higher, and those at the top have never done better. But average wages have barely budged. Inequality has deepened. Upward mobility has stalled. The cold hard fact is that even in the midst of recovery, too many Americans are working more than ever just to get by, let alone to get ahead. And too many still aren't working at all. So our job is to reverse these trends. It won't happen right away, and we won't agree on everything. But what I offer tonight is a set of concrete, practical proposals to speed up growth, strengthen the middle class, and build new ladders of opportunity into the middle class. Some require congressional action, and I'm eager to work with all of you. But America does not stand still, and neither will I. So wherever and whenever I can take steps without legislation to expand opportunity for more American families, that's what I'm going to do. As usual, our First Lady sets a good example. Michelle's, well, yeah. Michelle's Let's Move partnership with schools, businesses, local leaders has helped bring down childhood obesity rates for the first time in 30 years. And that's an achievement that will improve lives and reduce healthcare costs for decades to come. The Joining Forces Alliance that Michelle and Jill Biden launched has already encouraged employers to hire or train nearly 400,000 veterans and military spouses. Taking a page from that playbook, the White House just organized a College Opportunity Summit where already 150 universities, businesses, nonprofits have made concrete commitments to reduce inequality in access to higher education and to help every hardworking kid go to college and succeed when they get to campus. And across the country, we're partnering with mayors, governors, and state legislatures on issues from homelessness to marriage equality. The point is, there are millions of Americans outside of Washington who are tired of stale political arguments and are moving this country forward. They believe, and I believe, that here in America, our success should depend not on accident of birth, but the strength of our work ethic and the scope of our dreams. That's what drew our forebears here. That's how the daughter of a factory worker is CEO of America's largest automaker. How the son of the barkeep is Speaker of the House. how the son of a single mom can be president of the greatest nation on earth. You know, opportunity is who we are. And the defining project of our generation must be to restore that promise. We know where to start. The best measure of opportunity is access to a good job. With the economy picking up speed, companies say they intend to hire more people this year. And over half of big manufacturers say they're thinking of insourcing jobs from abroad. So let's make that decision easier for more companies. Both Democrats and Republicans have argued that our tax code is riddled with wasteful, complicated loopholes that punish businesses investing here and reward companies that keep profits abroad. Let's flip that equation. Let's work together to close those loopholes, end those incentives to ship jobs overseas, and lower tax rates for businesses that create jobs right here at home. Moreover, we can take the money we save from this transition to tax reform to create jobs rebuilding our roads, upgrading our ports, unclogging our commutes. Because in today's global economy, first-class jobs gravitate to first-class infrastructure. We'll need Congress to protect more than 3 million jobs by finishing transportation and waterways bills this summer. That can happen. But I'll act on my own to slash bureaucracy and streamline the permitting process for key projects so we can get more construction workers on the job as fast as possible. We also have the chance right now to beat other countries in the race for the next wave of high-tech manufacturing jobs. And my administration's launched 2 hubs for high-tech manufacturing in Raleigh, North Carolina, and Youngstown, Ohio, where we've connected businesses to research universities that can help America lead the world in advanced technologies. Tonight, I'm announcing we'll launch 6 more this year. Bipartisan bills in both houses could double the number of these hubs and the jobs they create. So get those bills to my desk. Put more Americans back to work. Let's do more to help the entrepreneurs and small business owners who create most new jobs in America. Over the past 5 years, my administration has made more loans to small business owners than any other. And when 98% of our exporters are small businesses, new trade partnerships with Europe and the Asia Pacific will help them create even more jobs. We need to work together on tools like Bipartisan Trade Promotion Authority to protect our workers, protect our environment, and open new markets to new goods stamped Made in the USA. Listen, China and Europe aren't standing on the sidelines. And neither should we. We know that the nation that goes all in on innovation today will own the global economy tomorrow. This is an edge America cannot surrender. Federally funded research helped lead to the ideas and inventions behind Google and smartphones. And that's why Congress should undo the damage done by last year's cuts to basic research, so we can unleash the next great American discovery. There are entire industries to be built based on vaccines that stay ahead of drug-resistant bacteria, or paper-thin material that's stronger than steel. And let's pass a patent reform bill that allows our businesses to stay focused on innovation, not costly and needless litigation. Now, one of the biggest factors in bringing more jobs back is our commitment to American energy. The all-the-above energy strategy I announced a few years ago is working, and today America is closer to energy independence than we have been in decades. One of the reasons why is natural gas. If extracted safely, it's the bridge fuel that can power our economy with less of the carbon pollution that causes climate change. Businesses plan to invest almost $100 billion in new factories that use natural gas. I'll cut red tape to help states get those factories built and put folks to work. And this Congress can help by putting people to work building fueling stations that shift more cars and trucks from foreign oil to American natural gas. Meanwhile, my administration will keep working with the industry to sustain production and jobs growth while strengthening protection of our air, our water, our communities. And while we're at it, I'll use my authority to protect more of our pristine federal lands for future generations. Well, it's not just oil and natural gas production that's booming. We're becoming a global leader in solar, too. Every 4 minutes, another American home or business goes solar. Every panel pounded into place by a worker whose job cannot be outsourced. Let's continue that progress with a smarter tax policy that stops giving $4 billion a year to fossil fuel industries that don't need it, so we can invest more in fuels of the future that do. And even as we've increased energy production, we've partnered with businesses, builders, and local communities to reduce the energy we consume. When we rescued our automakers, for example, we worked with them to set higher fuel efficiency standards for our cars. In the coming months, I'll build on that success by setting new standards for our trucks, so we can keep driving down oil imports and what we pay at the pump. And taken together, our energy policy is creating jobs and leading to a cleaner, safer planet. Over the past 8 years, the United States has reduced our total carbon pollution more than any other nation on Earth. But we have to act with more urgency, because the changing climate is already harming Western communities struggling with drought and coastal cities dealing with floods. That's why I directed my administration to work with states, utilities, and others to set new standards on the amount of carbon pollution our power plants are allowed to dump into the air. The shift to a cleaner energy economy won't happen overnight, and it will require some tough choices along the way. But the debate is settled. Climate change is a fact. And when our children's children look us in the eye and ask if we did all we could to leave them a safer, more stable world with new sources of energy, I want us to be able to say, yes, we did. Finally, if we're serious about economic growth, it is time to heed the call of business leaders, labor leaders, faith leaders, law enforcement, and fix our broken immigration system. Republicans and Democrats in the Senate have acted, and I know that members of both parties in the House want to do the same. Independent economists say immigration reform will grow our economy and shrink our deficits by almost $1 trillion in the next 2 decades. And for good reason. When people come here to fulfill their dreams, to study, invent, contribute to our culture, they make our country a more attractive place for businesses to locate and create jobs for everybody. So let's get immigration reform done this year. Let's get it done. It's time. The ideas I've outlined so far can speed up growth and create more jobs. But in this rapidly changing economy, we have to make sure that every American has the skills to fill those jobs. The good news is we know how to do it. 2 years ago, as the auto industry came roaring back, Andra Rush opened up a manufacturing firm in Detroit. She knew that Ford needed parts for the best-selling truck in America, and she knew how to make those parts. She just needed the workforce. So she dialed up what we call an American Job Center, places where folks can walk in to get the help or training they need to find a new job or a better job. She was flooded with new workers. And today, Detroit Manufacturing Systems has more than 700 employees. Now, what Andra and her employees experienced is how it should be for every employer and every job seeker. So tonight, I've asked Vice President Biden to lead an across-the-board reform of America's training programs to make sure they have one mission: train Americans with the employers need and match them to good jobs that need to be filled right now. That means more on-the-job training and more apprenticeships that set a young worker on an upward trajectory for life. It means connecting companies to community colleges that can help design training to fill their specific needs. And if Congress wants to help, you can concentrate funding on proven programs that connect more ready-to-work Americans with ready-to-be-filled jobs. I'm also convinced we can help Americans return to the workforce faster by reforming unemployment insurance so that it's more effective in today's economy. But first, this Congress needs to restore the unemployment insurance you just let expire for 1.6 million people. Let me tell you why. Misty DeMars is a mother of 2 young boys. She'd been steadily employed since she was a teenager, put herself through college. She'd never collected unemployment benefits, but she'd been paying taxes. In May, she and her husband used their life savings to buy their first home. A week later, budget cuts claimed the job she loved. Last month, when their unemployment insurance was cut off, she sat down and wrote me a letter, the kind I get every day. We are the face of the unemployment crisis, she wrote. I'm not dependent on the government. Our country depends on people like us who build careers, contribute to society, care about our neighbors. I'm confident that in time I will find a job, I will pay my taxes, and we will raise our children in their own home and the community we love. Please give us this chance. Congress, give these hard-working, responsible Americans that chance. Give them that chance. Give them the chance. They need our help right now, but more important, this country needs them in the game. That's why I've been asking CEOs to give more long-term unemployed workers a fair shot at new jobs, a new chance to support their families. And in fact, this week, many will come to the White House to make that commitment real. Tonight, I ask every business leader in America to join us and do the same, because we are stronger when America fields a full team. Of course, it's not enough to train today's workforce. We also have to prepare tomorrow's workforce by guaranteeing every child access to a world-class education. As Steven Rodriguez couldn't speak a of English when he moved to New York City at age 9. But last month, thanks to the support of great teachers and an innovative tutoring program, he led a march of his classmates through a crowd of cheering parents and neighbors from their high school to the post office where they mailed off their college applications. And this son of a factory worker just found out he's going to college this fall. Five years ago, we set out to change the odds for all our kids. We worked with lenders to reform student loans, and today more young people are earning college degrees than ever before. Race to the Top, with the help of governors from both parties, has helped states raise expectations and performance. Teachers and principals in schools from Tennessee to Washington, D.C. are making big strides in preparing students with the skills for the new economy. Problem solving, critical thinking, science, technology, engineering, math. Now, some of this change is hard. It requires everything from more challenging curriculums and more demanding parents to better support for teachers and new ways to measure how well our kids think, not how well they can fill in a bubble on a test. But it is worth it, and it is working. The problem is we're still not reaching enough kids, and we're not reaching them in time, and that has to change. Research shows that one of the best investments we can make in a child's life is high-quality early education. Last year, I asked this Congress to help states make high-quality pre-K available to every 4-year-old. And as a parent, as well as a president, I repeat that request tonight. But in the meantime, 30 states have raised pre-K funding on their own. They know we can't wait. So just as we worked with states to reform our schools, this year we'll invest in new partnerships with states and communities across the country in a race to the top for our youngest children. And as Congress decides what it's going to do, I'm going to pull together a coalition of elected officials, business leaders, and philanthropists willing to help more kids access the high-quality pre-K that they need. It is right for America. We need to get this done. Last year, I also pledged to connect 99% of our students to high-speed broadband over the next 4 years. Tonight I can announce that with the support of the FCC and companies like Apple, Microsoft, Sprint, and Verizon, we've got a down payment to start connecting more than 15,000 schools and 20 million students over the next 2 years without adding a dime to the deficit. We're working to redesign high schools and partner them with colleges and employers that offer the real-world education and hands-on training that can lead directly to a job and career. We're shaking up our system of higher education to give parents more information and colleges more incentive to offer better value so that no middle-class kid is priced out of a college education. We're offering millions the opportunity to cap their monthly student loan payments to 10% of their income. And I want to work with Congress to see how we can help even more Americans who feel trapped by student loan debt. And I'm reaching out to some of America's leading foundations and corporations on a new initiative to help more young men of color facing especially tough odds to stay on track and reach their full potential. The bottom line is, Michelle and I want every child to have the same chance this country gave us. But we know our opportunity agenda won't be complete. And too many young people entering the workforce today will see the American dream as an empty promise, unless we also do more to make sure our economy honors the dignity of work and hard work pays off for every single American. You know, today, women make up about half our workforce, but they still make 77 cents for every dollar a man earns. That is wrong. And in 2014, it's an embarrassment. Women deserve equal pay for equal work. She deserves to have a baby without sacrificing her job. A mother deserves a day off to care for a sick child or a sick parent without running into hardship. And you know what? A father does too. It is time to do away with workplace policies that belong in a Mad Men episode. This year, let's all come together, Congress, the White House, businesses from Wall Street to Main Street, to give every woman the opportunity she deserves, because I believe when women succeed, America succeeds. Now, women hold a majority of lower wage jobs, but they're not the only ones stifled by stagnant wages. Americans understand that some people will earn more money than others, and we don't resent those who, by virtue of their efforts, achieve incredible success. That's what America's all about. But Americans overwhelmingly agree that no one who works full-time should ever have to raise a family in poverty. In the years since I asked this Congress to raise the minimum wage, 5 states have passed laws to raise theirs. Many businesses have done it on their own. Nick Shute is here today with his boss, John Serrano. John's an owner of Punch Pizza in Minneapolis, and Nick helps make the dough. Only now he makes more of it. John just gave his employees a raise to $10 an hour, and that's a decision that has eased their financial stress and boosted their morale. Tonight, I ask more of America's business leaders to follow John's lead. Do what you can to raise your employees' wages. It's good for the economy, it's good for America. To every mayor, governor, state legislator in America, I say, you don't have to wait for Congress to act. Americans will support you if you take this on. And as a chief executive, I intend to lead by example. Profitable corporations like Costco see higher wages as the smart way to boost productivity and reduce turnover. We should too. In the coming weeks, I will issue an executive order requiring federal contractors to pay their federally funded employees a fair wage of at least $10.10 an hour, because if you cook our troops' meals or wash their dishes, you should not have to live in poverty. Of course, to reach millions more, Congress does need to get on board. Today, the federal minimum wage is worth about 20% less than it was when Ronald Reagan first stood here. And Tom Harkin and George Miller have a bill to fix that by lifting the minimum wage to $10.10. It's easy to remember, 10.10. This will help families. It'll give businesses customers with more money to spend. It does not involve any new bureaucratic program. So join the rest of the country. Say yes. Give America a raise. Give them a raise. There are other steps we can take to help families make ends meet. And few are more effective at reducing inequality and helping families pull themselves up through hard work than the Earned Income Tax Credit. Right now, it helps about half of all parents at some point. Think about that. It helps about half of all parents in America at some point in their lives. But I agree with Republicans like Senator Rubio that it doesn't do enough for single workers who don't have kids. So let's work together to strengthen the credit, reward work, help more Americans get ahead. Let's do more to help Americans save for retirement. Today, most workers don't have a pension. A Social Security check often isn't enough on its own. And while the stock market has doubled over the last 5 years, that doesn't help folks who don't have 401ks. That's why tomorrow I will direct the Treasury to create a new way for working Americans to start their own retirement savings. My RA. It's a new savings bond that encourages folks to build a nest egg. My RA guarantees a decent return with no risk of losing what you put in. And if this Congress wants to help, work with me to fix an upside-down tax code that gives big tax breaks to help the wealthy save, but does little or nothing for middle-class Americans. Offer every American access to an automatic IRA on the job so they can save at work just like everybody in this chamber can. And since the most important investment many families make is their home, send me legislation that protects taxpayers from footing the bill for a housing crisis ever again and keeps the dream of home ownership alive for future generations. One last point on financial security. For decades, few things exposed hardworking families to economic hardship more than a broken health care system. And in case you haven't heard, we're in the process of fixing that. A pre-existing condition used to mean that someone like Amanda Shelley, a physician's assistant and single mom from Arizona, couldn't get health insurance. But on January 1st, she got covered. On January 3rd, she felt a sharp pain. On January 6th, she had emergency surgery. Just 1 week earlier, Amanda said, and that surgery would have meant bankruptcy. That's what health insurance reform is all about. The peace of mind that if misfortune strikes, you don't have to lose everything. Already, because of the Affordable Care Act, more than 3 million Americans under age 26 have gained coverage under their parents' plan. More than 9 million Americans have signed up for private health insurance or Medicaid coverage. 9 million. And here's another number, 0. Because of this law, no American, none, 0, can ever again be dropped or denied coverage for a pre-existing condition like asthma or back pain or cancer. No woman can ever be charged more just because she's a woman. And we did all this while adding years to Medicare's finances, keeping Medicare premiums flat, and lowering prescription costs for millions of seniors. Now, I do not expect to convince my Republican friends on the merits of this law. But I know that the American people are not interested in refighting old battles. So, again, if you have specific plans to cut costs, cover more people, increase choice, tell America what you do differently. Let's see if the numbers add up. But let's not have another 40-something votes to repeal a law that's already helping millions of Americans like Amanda. The first 40 were plenty. We all owe it to the American people to say what we're for, not just what we're against. And if you want to know the real impact this law is having, just talk to Governor Steve Beshear of Kentucky, who's here tonight. Now, Kentucky is not the most liberal part of the country. That's not where I got my highest vote totals. But he's like a man possessed when it comes to covering his Commonwealth's families. They're our neighbors and our friends, he said. They're people we shop and go to church with. Farmers out on the tractor. Grocery clerks. They're people who go to work every morning praying they don't get sick. No one deserves to live that way. Steve's right. That's why tonight I ask every American who knows someone without health insurance to help them get covered by March 31st. Help them get covered. Moms, get on your kids to sign up. Kids, call your mom and walk her through the application. They'll give her some peace of mind, and plus she'll appreciate hearing from you. After all, that's the spirit that has always moved this nation forward. It's the spirit of citizenship. The recognition that through hard work and responsibility, we can pursue our individual dreams but still come together as one American family to make sure the next generation can pursue its dreams as well. Citizenship means standing up for everyone's right to vote. Last year, part of the Voting Rights Act was weakened, but conservative Republicans and liberal Democrats are working together to strengthen it. And the bipartisan commission I appointed, chaired by my campaign lawyer and Governor Romney's campaign lawyer, came together and have offered reforms so that no one has to wait more than a half hour to vote. Let's support these efforts. It should be the power of our vote, not the size of our bank accounts, that drives our democracy. Citizenship means standing up for the lives that gun violence steals from us each day. I've seen the courage of parents, students, pastors, police officers all over this country who say, we are not afraid. And I intend to keep trying, with or without Congress, to help stop more tragedies from visiting innocent Americans in our movie theaters and our shopping malls or schools like Sandy Hook. Citizenship demands a sense of common purpose. participation in the hard work of self-government, an obligation to serve our communities. And I know this chamber agrees that few Americans give more to their country than our diplomats and the men and women of the United States Armed Forces. Thank you. Tonight, because of the extraordinary troops and civilians who risk and lay down their lives to keep us free, the United States is more secure. When I took office, nearly 180,000 Americans were serving in Iraq and Afghanistan. Today, all our troops are out of Iraq. More than 60,000 of our troops have already come home from Afghanistan. With Afghan forces now in the lead for their own security, our troops have moved to a support role. Together with our allies, we will complete our mission there by the end of this year, and America's longest war will finally be over. After 2014, we will support a unified Afghanistan as it takes responsibility for its own future. If the Afghan government signs a security agreement that we have negotiated, a small force of Americans could remain in Afghanistan with NATO allies to carry out two narrow missions: training and assisting Afghan forces, and counterterrorism operations to pursue any remnants of al-Qaeda. For while our relationship with Afghanistan will change, one thing will not: our resolve that terrorists do not launch attacks against our country. The fact is, that danger remains. While we've put al-Qaeda's core leadership on a path to defeat, the threat has evolved as al-Qaeda affiliates and other extremists take root in different parts of the world. In Yemen, Somalia, Iraq, Mali, we have to keep working with partners to disrupt and disable those networks. In Syria, we'll support the opposition that rejects the agenda of terrorist networks. Here at home, we'll keep strengthening our defenses and combat new threats like cyber attacks. And as we reform our defense budget, we will have to keep faith with our men and women in uniform and invest in the capabilities they need to succeed in future missions. We have to remain vigilant. But I strongly believe our leadership and our security cannot depend on our outstanding military alone. As Commander-in-Chief, I have used force when needed to protect the American people, and I will never hesitate to do so as long as I hold this office. But I will not send our troops into harm's way unless it is truly necessary, nor will I allow our sons and daughters to be mired in open-ended conflicts. We must fight the battles that need to be fought, not those that terrorists prefer from us, large-scale deployments that drain our strength and may ultimately feed extremism. So even as we actively and aggressively pursue terrorist networks, through more targeted efforts and by building the capacity of our foreign partners, America must move off a permanent war footing. That's why I've imposed prudent limits on the use of drones. For we will not be safer if people abroad believe we strike within their countries without regard for the consequence. That's why, working with this Congress, I will reform our surveillance programs, because the vital work of our intelligence community depends on public confidence, here and abroad, that privacy of ordinary people is not being violated. And with the Afghan war ending, this needs to be the year Congress lifts the remaining restrictions on detainee transfers and we close the prison at Guantanamo Bay. Because we counter terrorism not just through intelligence and military actions, but by remaining true to our constitutional ideals and setting an example for the rest of the world. You see, in a world of complex threats, our security, our leadership depends on all elements of our power, including strong and principled diplomacy. American diplomacy has rallied more than 50 countries to prevent nuclear materials from falling into the wrong hands and allowed us to reduce our own reliance on Cold War stockpiles. American diplomacy, backed by the threat of force, is why Syria's chemical weapons are being eliminated. And we will continue to work with the international community to usher in the future the Syrian people deserve, a future free of dictatorship, terror, and fear. As we speak, American diplomacy is supporting Israelis and Palestinians as they engage in the difficult but necessary talks to end the conflict there, to achieve dignity and an independent state for Palestinians, and lasting peace and security for the State of Israel, a Jewish state that knows America will always be at their side. And it is American diplomacy, backed by pressure, that has halted the progress of Iran's nuclear program and rolled back parts of that program for the very first time in a decade. As we gather here tonight, Iran has begun to eliminate its stockpile of higher levels of enriched uranium. It's not installing advanced centrifuges. Unprecedented inspections help the world verify every day that Iran is not building a bomb. And with our allies and partners, we're engaged in negotiations to see if we can peacefully achieve a goal we all share, preventing Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. These negotiations will be difficult. They may not succeed. We are clear-eyed about Iran's support for terrorist organizations like Hezbollah, which threatens our allies. And we're clear about the mistrust between our nations, mistrust that cannot be wished away. These negotiations don't rely on trust. Any long-term deal we agree to must be based on verifiable action that convinces us and the international community that Iran is not building a nuclear bomb. If John F. Kennedy and Ronald Reagan could negotiate with the Soviet Union, then surely a strong and confident America can negotiate with less powerful adversaries today. The sanctions that we put in place help make this opportunity possible. But let me be clear. If this Congress sends me a new sanctions bill now that threatens to derail these talks, I will veto it. For the sake of our national security, we must give diplomacy a chance to succeed. If Iran's leaders do not seize this opportunity, then I will be the first to call for more sanctions and stand ready to exercise all options to make sure Iran does not build a nuclear weapon. But if Iran's leaders do seize the chance, and we'll know soon enough, then Iran could take an important step to rejoin the community of nations, and we will have resolved one of the leading security challenges of our time without the risks of war. And finally, let's remember that our leadership is defined not just by our defense against threats, but by the enormous opportunities to do good and promote understanding around the globe, to forge greater cooperation, to expand new markets, to free people from fear and want. And no one is better positioned to take advantage of those opportunities than America. Our alliance with Europe remains the strongest the world has ever known. From Tunisia to Burma, we're supporting those who are willing to do the hard work of building democracy. In Ukraine, we stand for the principle that all people have the right to express themselves freely and peacefully, and to have a say in their country's future. Across Africa, we're bringing together businesses and governments to double access to electricity and help end extreme poverty. In the Americas, we're building new ties of commerce, but we're also expanding cultural and educational exchanges among young people. And we will continue to focus on the Asia-Pacific, where we support our allies, shape a future of greater security and prosperity, and extend a hand to those devastated by disaster, as we did in the Philippines when our Marines and civilians rushed to aid those battered by a typhoon, and who are greeted with words like, "We will never forget your kindness," and "God bless America." We do these things because they help promote our long-term security. And we do them because we believe in the inherent dignity and equality of every human being, regardless of race or religion, creed or sexual orientation. And next week, the world will see one expression of that commitment when Team USA marches the red, white, and blue into the Olympic Stadium and brings home the gold. My fellow Americans, no other country in the world does what we do. On every issue, the world turns to us, not simply because of the size of our economy or our military might, but because of the ideals we stand for and the burdens we bear to advance them. No one knows this better than those who serve in uniform. As this time of war draws to a close, a new generation of heroes returns to civilian life. We'll keep slashing that backlog so our veterans receive the benefits they've earned, and our wounded warriors receive the health care, including the mental health care that they need. We'll keep working to help all our veterans translate their skills and leadership into jobs here at home. And we will all continue to join forces to honor and support our remarkable military families. Let me tell you about one of those families I've come to know. I first met Corey Remsburg, a proud Army Ranger, at Omaha Beach on the 65th anniversary of D-Day. Along with some of his fellow Rangers, he walked me through the program and the ceremony. He was a strong, impressive young man. He had an easy manner. He was sharp as a tack. And we joked around and took pictures, and I told him to stay in touch. A few months later, on his 10th deployment, Corey was nearly killed by a massive roadside bomb in Afghanistan. His comrades found him in a canal, face down, underwater, shrapnel in his brain. For months, he lay in a coma. And the next time I met him in the hospital, he couldn't speak, could barely move. Over the years, he's endured dozens of surgeries and procedures, hours of grueling rehab every day. Even now, Corey's still blind in one eye, still struggles on his left side. But slowly, steadily, with the support of caregivers like his dad, Craig, and the community around him, Corey has grown stronger. Day by day, he's learned to speak again, and stand again, and walk again. And he's working toward the day when he can serve his country again. My recovery has not been easy, he says. Nothing in life that's worth anything is easy. Corey is here tonight. And like the Army he loves, like the America he serves, Sergeant First Class Corey Remsburg never gives up, and he does not quit. Corey. My fellow Americans, men and women like Corey remind us that America has never come easy. Our freedom, our democracy has never been easy. Sometimes we stumble, we make mistakes, we get frustrated or discouraged. But for more than 200 years, we have put those things aside and placed our collective shoulder to the wheel of progress to create and build and expand the possibilities of individual achievement, to free other nations from tyranny and fear, to promote justice and fairness and equality under the law, so that the words set to paper by our founders are made real for every citizen. The America we want for our kids, a rising America where honest work is plentiful and communities are strong, where prosperity is widely shared, an opportunity for all lets us go as far as our dreams and toil will take us. None of it is easy. But if we work together, if we summon what is best in us, the way Corey summoned what is best in him, with our feet planted firmly in today but our eyes cast toward tomorrow, I know it is within our reach. Believe it. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.
I'm Mark Topping, the Time Life Building Time Magazine's continuing coverage of President Obama's State of the Union address. My first sense of it was the president was pretty fired up and engaged in terms of delivery. Clearly recognizes this is an important speech for him, quite obviously. But also we're going to now go on a hunt, as news people do, for the news in the speech, because there wasn't a great deal new in terms of programs or rhetoric, but there were some things. So I'm rejoined by my colleagues, Bobby Ghosh and Rana Ferrara and Michael Scherer. Michael, start with you. Just tease out the news. What did he say that we either didn't know about or that's significant that will be rattling around Washington tomorrow?
Programmatically, I don't think there was much. I think the surprising takeaway I took is I thought it was reminiscent in a way of the late George W. Bush State of the Unions, which turned into sort of pep talks. He was trying to buck up the country. I think a lot of this, even though he talked about the difficulty Americans were having and the challenges it faced and what he wanted to do, it was very much a buck up the country, make us feel like we're headed in the right direction, which makes sense going into election year. I think the other thing that I didn't expect, but maybe should have been expected, was the going on offense on Obamacare, taking it straight, the most partisan moment of the speech where he basically dared Republicans to keep voting against Obamacare, saying that he's going to make the case that that's just politics, it has nothing to do with anything, and try and discredit it out of the bat.
And challenges him, as he did with the Republicans during the campaign, and as he has in the past, to say, if you got something better to replace it with, bring it forward.
And Republicans are preparing things.
Yeah.
I mean, there won't be as comprehensive, and he'll criticize that. He'll say it doesn't count. But Republicans are aware of that criticism and are actually concerned about it and are trying to find a way, as they move into this election season, to blunt that criticism, which they know is coming from Democrats.
Okay, you're watching there the president depart the hall, saying goodbye, kind of the reverse of his entrance, stopping and touching a few hands and greeting various people. You can watch that while we continue to discuss. Rana, there were some things about retirement security that I think programmatically are a little bit new. Some of them were teased out. If you're someone, either a citizen concerned about the economy, a business person thinking about the climate, what was in there either new or important for you?
Well, I don't think there was anything tremendously new, but there was a real connecting of the dots of some of the things that he's spoken about before. The importance of manufacturing, the importance of cheap energy and the shale gas revolution in fueling manufacturing and the jobs that could be created from that industry, and also the fact that we need to retrain our workforce in order to equip them with the skills to work in these new jobs. I think what we didn't hear a lot about, unfortunately, was corporate tax reform and entitlement reform, which is still one big reason that business isn't investing and doing more to really help spur growth, and I'm sure that you're going to hear some conservatives talking about that.
Right. Bobby, I was struck, as I told you, about Iran, both saying that he would veto a sanctions bill, not a surprise, but something usually you hear president's advisors say they'd recommend to veto. The president drew that as a clear line. He also kind of extolled sanctions and sort of suggested that sanctions and diplomacy had been as big a deal as anything else and the diplomacy is a bit of an emphasis, I think some people will focus on bringing Iran to where we are now with the possibility at least of a deal.
The sanctions part, he and people around him have suggested before. They've been making the argument that sanctions is what brought Iran to the table. The Iranians, of course, are arguing that more centrifuges is what brought the Western powers to the table, and you can argue that square or round. But you're absolutely right. Coming out and saying that he will veto any new sanctions proposed by Congress might have been directed as much to fellow Democrats as to Republicans. But he's trying to sort of head them off at the pass. I'm not sure that's enough to stop them, because there's a lot of political grandstanding to be enjoyed if you're one of the senators backing the sanctions, and I suspect they will at least continue pro forma to push forward with that, and we've discussed that as well earlier. On the whole, from a foreign policy point of view, quite disappointing, I would say. Not very much that was new. He seemed to be checking off a few boxes as he went along. Some of it was a little far-fetched, the notion that under his administration they've been promoting democracy around the world. He didn't mention Egypt as a place where there's not been so much promotion and very little democracy. As we said at the top of the hour, he mentioned only in passing Asia, so the big Pacific pivot has not happened and doesn't look like it's going to be a big part of his thinking this year going forward. If this was his setting out his foreign policy agenda, it's still very much where America's foreign policy has been for decades, which is in the Middle East. Iran, Syria. He didn't mention the humanitarian crisis, which is epic now, but he mentioned Syria a few times. He did bring up the fact that Al Qaeda was resurgent in many parts of the world, although he offered no real fresh prescription on that. More drones, I think, is the bottom line there.
I thought it was notable that early in the speech he had a sort of China card line where he said, "We're better than China. We can beat China," which is a very economic populist play. It actually polls very well. We know from the 2012 election, Americans are actually very concerned about China and see that country as a
he said. I think he said was that for the first time in a few years, China is not the number one destination for investment. America is. Of course, the thing is that it was American investment that was previously going to China, and some of that is going on.
I want to congratulate the four of us. We've gone, I think, the longest anyone has in covering a State of the Union without using the phrase laundry list. So that's great. In that regard, unless I missed it, unless my word search failed, he did not mention Russia.
He did not. He mentioned in past. He didn't mention Ukraine. One just throwaway line there, which I took to be a little jab at Vladimir Putin, but I don't think Putin is particularly susceptible to things like that. He talked about Sochi and the Olympics, and that was the closest he got to mentioning Russia. And no real, apart from that throwaway line at the top, no real mention of China either.
Right. So, Michael, obviously one of the things we talked about at the top, this notion of executive action, saying he'd work with Congress. Overall, in terms of tone and emphasis, would you say this was a speech where we see the president leaving the hall now? So we will have the Republican response in its entirety coming up in just about 5 minutes. Overall, would you say the speech was more in terms of reaching out to Republicans or more drawing lines and confronting them?
I think there's a lot of talk before the speech about how this is a year of action from the White House, about how we're going to take these executive actions. I think if you add it up, and I haven't done this, the laundry list of what he said he's going to do by himself versus what he was asking Congress to do with him, the stuff he's going to do by himself is much smaller in scope and importance than what he was still asking Congress to do. He's really limited. He can talk the talk, pretend like he's the guy in charge of everything, but there's not much he can actually do, and he didn't really offer that much new. So I think it was a combative speech more than it was a conciliatory speech, but at the same time, he was very clear he needs Congress.
I think that's true on the economic front too. The big stuff, tax reform, entitlement reform, you really need to have buy-in. The things that are near and dear to his heart, like the growth of manufacturing, retooling secondary education, he spoke a lot about. But again, these are sort of at the margins. The big picture stuff requires Congress.
What would you say, all three of you, the biggest moments of reconciliation of bipartisanship? Israel got a bipartisan applause. Were there other things you heard on foreign policy, national security?
On foreign policy, not so much. Of course, there's the usual, you always expect bipartisan applause when the military is invoked in any way, shape, or form. I think in Afghanistan, the fact that we're drawing down is something that is, whether it reflected itself in that hall or not, is universally popular in this country. Beyond that, no, there was a moment of realism, I thought, on his part when he said that the negotiations with Iran might fail. That too, just like the vetoing, the idea that he would veto any new sanctions, that too was a little bit surprising. But it's a realistic admission of what most of us have known. Right. He didn't say what would happen if the negotiations did fail.
There was a lot of clapping too at points where he invoked the American dream and social mobility and the importance of that. And
hard
I think
to come out against the American dream.
Hard to come out against it, although it depends on how you go about it. We know that inequality actually decreases social mobility, and that how we deal with inequality is often a very partisan issue. But you heard a lot of clapping about the idea that we want to increase social mobility in this country.
The way he talked about energy, that was interesting. You can see it evolving over these addresses to Congress since he came in. Remember, in that first address, he called, I think, oil yesterday's energy. And now he was really championing his all-of-the-above strategy. The
he
shale
needs
gas
it to
boom.
make manufacturing
He focused
work.
more on gas than oil. I don't think he was actually praising oil in that section. But there's definitely a shift in, and part is just because of what's happening in the country right now, but a shift in how he talks about fossil fuels. Doesn't mean he doesn't still do the partisan jab at the end.
Right.
The line "global warming is a fact" that was highlighted, of course, by John Boehner doing nothing behind him to applaud. that fact.
One of the things that struck me quite a bit was the emphasis on women by the president. Many of the examples of the people sitting with the First Lady were women, including America's most famous female auto executive, as well as a pretty passionate paragraph in the president's speech. And a lot of the policies he talked about are part of the Democratic Party's political appeal to women. So we're going to go back to the Capitol shortly in Washington, where we're going to hear the official Republican response, which is going to be by a woman. Not a very well-known woman. Cathy McMorris Rodgers is the fourth-ranking Republican in the House of Representatives. She has worked her way up with a pretty compelling story. I believe I am correct in saying she is the first sitting female member of the House to have 3 children while in office. And she is being put forward because of her compelling story, but also no doubt Republicans recognize that politically and substantively, they need to be more appealing to female voters at all levels of elections around the country. And you see her there with one of her children. She is stepping into a role that commentators in the last few days have pointed out has not been one that has led to great glory. People who've been chosen to give this response, a difficult speech to give under any circumstances, following the president with his big audience. No one who's given that response has parlayed it into the White House or in many cases success. And there have been some low moments. Last year, Senator Rubio of Florida gave the response and famously got some dry mouth and grabbed a bottle of water. And so people have talked about this as a tough role. Very tough for her. She is, if you're a student of Washington or the Republican Party, you might have seen her, but she is not a very high-profile person. She does not appear all that regularly on the Sunday morning public affairs shows or in other visible forums. So we're going to go there and see Cathy McMorris Rodgers and then come back to talk about the Republicans and the president.
What an honor it is for me to be with you after the President's State of the Union. Tonight, we honor America, a nation that has witnessed the greatest rise of freedom and opportunity our world has ever seen. A nation where we are not defined by our limits, but by our potential. And a nation where a girl who worked at the McDonald's drive-thru to help pay for college can be with you from the United States Capitol. But the most important moments right now aren't happening here. They're not in the Oval Office or in the House chamber. They're in your homes, kissing your kids goodnight, figuring out how to pay the bills, getting ready for tomorrow's doctor's visit, waiting to hear from those you love serving in Afghanistan, or searching for that big job interview. After all, we the people have been the foundation of America since her earliest days. People from all walks of life and from all corners of the world. People who come to America because here, no challenge is too great and no dream too big. That's the genius of America. Tonight, the president made more promises that sound good, but won't actually solve the problems facing Americans. We want you to have a better life. The president wants that too. But we part ways when it comes to how to make that happen. So tonight, I'd like to share a more hopeful Republican vision, one that empowers you, not the government. It's one that champions free markets and trusts people to make their own decisions, not a government that decides for you. It helps working families rise above the limits of poverty and protects our most vulnerable. And it's one where Washington plays by the same rules that you do. It's a vision that is fair and offers the promise of a better future for every American. If you would have told me as a little girl that I would one day put my hand on the Bible and be sworn in as the 200th woman to serve in the House of Representatives, I wouldn't have thought it possible. I grew up working on my family's orchard and fruit stand in Kettle Falls, a small town in eastern Washington, getting up before dawn with my brother to pick apples. My dad drove a school bus, and my mom worked as a part-time bookkeeper. They taught me to work hard, help others, and always, always dream for more. So when I showed my 4-H animals at the county fair, my parents used to say to me, "Cathy, you need to save this money so you can go to college one day." And so I did. I saved, I worked hard, and I became the first in my family to graduate from college. The chance to go from my Washington to this one was unexpected. I came to Congress to help empower people, not politicians, to grow the working middle class, not the government, and to ensure that everyone in this country can find a job. Because a job is so much more than a paycheck. It gives us purpose, dignity, and the foundation to build a future. I was single when I was elected, but it wasn't long before I met Brian, a retired Navy commander, and now we have 3 beautiful children, one who was born just 8 weeks ago. Like all parents, we have high hopes and dreams for our children, but we also know what it's like to face challenges. 3 days after our son was born, Cole, we got news no parent expects. Cole was diagnosed with Down syndrome. The doctors told us he could have endless complications, heart defects, even early Alzheimer's. They told us all the problems. But when we looked at our son, we saw only possibilities. We saw a gift from God. And today, we see a 6-year-old boy who dances to Bruce Springsteen, who reads above grade level, and who is the best big brother in the world. We see all the things he can do, not those he can't. And Cole and his sisters, Grace and Bren, have only made me more determined to see the potential in every human life. That whether we're born with an extra 21st chromosome or without $1 to our name, we are not defined by our limits, but by our potential. Because our mission, not only as Republicans, but as Americans, is to once again ensure that we are not bound by where we come from, but empowered by what we can become. That is the gap Republicans are working to close. It's the gap we all face between where you are and where you want to be. The president talks a lot about income inequality, but the real gap we face today is one of opportunity inequality. And with this administration's policies, that gap has become far too wide. We see this gap growing every single day. We see it in our neighbors who are struggling to find jobs, a husband who's now working just part-time, a child who drops out of college because she can't afford tuition, or parents who are outliving their life savings. Last month, more Americans stopped looking for a job than found one. Too many people are falling further and further behind because right now, the president's policies are making people's lives harder. Republicans have plans to close the gap. Plans that will focus on jobs first, without more spending, government bailouts, and red tape. Every day, we're working to expand our economy, one manufacturing job, nursing degree, and small business at a time. We have plans to improve our education and training systems so you have the choice to determine where your kids go to school, so college is affordable and skills training is modernized. And yes, it's time to honor our history of legal immigration. We're working on a step-by-step solution to immigration reform by first securing our borders and making sure America will always attract the best, brightest, and hardest working from around the world. And with too many Americans living paycheck to paycheck, we have solutions to help you take home more of your pay through lower taxes, cheaper energy costs, and affordable health care. Not long ago, I got a letter from Betty in Spokane, who had hoped the president's health care law would save her money, but found out instead her premiums were going up nearly $700 a month. We've all talked to too many people who've received cancellation notices they didn't expect, or who can no longer see the doctors they always have. No, we shouldn't go back to the way things were, but this law is not working. Republicans believe healthcare choices should be yours, not the government's, and that whether you're a boy with Down syndrome or a woman with breast cancer, you can find coverage and a doctor who will treat you. So we hope the president will join us in a year of real action by empowering people, not by making their lives harder with unprecedented spending, higher taxes, and fewer jobs. As Republicans, we advance these plans every day because we believe in a government that trusts people and doesn't limit where you finish because of where you started. That is what we stand for. It's for an America that is every bit as compassionate as it is exceptional. If we're successful, years from now, our children will say that we rebuilt the American dream. We built a working middle class that could take in anyone and a workforce that could take on the world. Whether you're a girl in Kettle Falls or a boy from Brooklyn, our children should be able to say that we closed the gap. Our plan is one that dreams big for everyone and turns its back on no one. The president said many things tonight, but now I ask him to listen to you. For the true State of the Union lies in your heart and in your home. Tomorrow, I'll watch my son Cole get on the school bus. Others will wait in the doctor's office or interview for that first job. Some of us will celebrate new beginnings. Others will face great challenges. But all of us will wake up and do what is uniquely American. We will look forward to the boundless potential that lies ahead. We will give thanks to the brave men and women who have answered America's call to freedom, like Sergeant Jacob Hess from Spokane, who recently gave his life to protect all of ours. So tonight, I simply offer a prayer for Sergeant Hess's family, your family, and for our larger American family, that with the guidance of God, we may prove ourselves worthy of His blessings of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. For when we embrace these gifts, we are each doing our part to form a more perfect union. May God guide you and our president, and may God continue to bless the United States of America.
Representative Kathy McMorris Rogers from the state of Washington doing the Republican response to President Obama's State of the Union address, a very tough task. Reviews, as you can imagine, around this table and on Twitter mixed, but I think people are going to say she did better than a lot of people have done. No obvious huge errors to distract from her message, and it did give the Republicans one of the things they wanted, which is a prominent female spokesperson. We'll talk a bit more about that. But I want to dive into some of the clips from the president's speech in our time with you here from New York, and start with when the president talked about the issue that people point to say has the potential for a bipartisan compromise this year, which is immigration. Let's listen to President Obama on that.
When people come here to fulfill their dreams, to study, invent, contribute to our culture, they make our country a more attractive place for businesses to locate and create jobs for everybody. So let's get immigration reform done this year. Let's get it done. It's time.
So this is an issue that Republicans have moved on and sent signals in the last few days that they're willing to work with the Democrats on. The reaction shot there from Eric Cantor, the senior Republican. I'm not sure I have enough of an expert of human nature, Eric Cantor, to say what that series of expressions meant, but not just in the room, but in general, where does the president stand in trying to get this as a bipartisan achievement this year?
I think what you said, there was another applause line that followed that in which Boehner was sort of slow clapping it. I think the Republicans are trying to hold back their enthusiasm, but clearly from the leadership point of view, they want to get something done. Later this week, they're going to announce a series of principles based upon which they're going to move forward in passing probably small ball legislation, series of bills that could add up to something, some sort of a compromise before the election or something that resolves itself after the election. I think there's movement. There could be something that happens. It won't be what Democrats want, and it has to be done incredibly delicately. And I think Obama was casting it the right way there for getting something done. He was saying it's an economic issue. It'll actually lift all boats.
There's no economic case against it. I mean, I'm sure everyone's getting a lot of pressure from business around this. You know, the research shows it benefits not just at the top end with the H-1B visas, but also at the lower end. So it's a big issue. I
want to keep going on this theme of the president and John Boehner. You could sort of write the history of the Barack Obama administration traced through his relationship with Boehner, someone he's built some ties with but had some big blowups on, particularly around some of those bigger fiscal issues. want to show you a moment of the president reaching out very explicitly and clearly to John Boehner, and he got the signature Boehner reaction. You'll notice a little weepiness as you watch the end of this sequence.
How the son of a barkeep is Speaker of the House. How the son of a single mom can be president of the greatest nation on earth. You know, opportunity is who we are. And the defining project of our generation must be to restore that promise. We know where to start.
So, Michael, quickly, John Boehner is susceptible to weepiness, but is there anything there? Do you think that'll come away appreciating the homage to his roots, or is that just a one-off?
I'm sure he'll appreciate it, but it won't change anything John Boehner does. I mean, what's remarkable about Boehner is that he's a guy who goes out every day and says things he probably doesn't believe, and everybody knows he probably doesn't believe. I mean, that's sort of the definition of a member of Congress's job, to sort of feign outrage to try and drive a news cycle, and yet he has so little guile when it comes to stuff like that. You can see right through him when he gets emotional. It's
Right.
sort of
I want to go back to this issue we mentioned a couple of times now of women. I said I thought it was a big part of the speech, and there was one paragraph the president pretty fiery on, a big reaction. Democrats are going to play this card politically, not just as craven politics in the midterms, because it worked for them in 2012, but because they believe in a lot of the pocketbook issues, that their advantage lies with pressing the notion of how economics affects America's women. Let's listen to the president talk about that set of issues.
A mother deserves a day off to care for a sick child or a sick parent without running into hardship. And you know what? A father does too. It is time to do away with workplace policies that belong in a Mad Men episode. This year, let's all come together, Congress, the White House, businesses from Wall Street to Main Street, to give every woman the opportunity she deserves, because I believe when women succeed, America succeeds.
Animated response there from the First Lady and from Rosa DeLauro, one of the more prominent female Democratic members of Congress. Is the president on solid ground talking about an America in which women do face a lot of economic shortfalls in terms of men, in terms of the issues he talked about?
Well, it's interesting. I mean, women are actually making up a greater and greater percentage of the breadwinners in households, and I think that he's speaking to that. They have increasing economic power, but there's still a wage gap, and so I think that he's really trying to, speak to both of those issues. I have to say, I really loved the line about getting rid of workplace policies that belong in the Mad Men era. That was a big
feeling for the current idiom.
I think so. Yeah.
Pretty good. Okay, we want to just show you a little bit more of the president. One of the issues Democrats plan to push very hard this year in Congress and a lot of the states, and then depending on what happens in the midterms, is the issue of minimum wage. And the president called, as has been long expected, as a pretty big part of his agenda this year on Congress to raise the federal minimum wage. Let's listen to that.
Profitable corporations like Costco see higher wages as the smart way to boost productivity and reduce turnover. We should too. In the coming weeks, I will issue an executive order requiring federal contractors to pay their federally funded employees a fair wage of at least $10.10 an hour, because if you cook our troops' meals or wash their dishes, you should not have to live in poverty.
Michael, another line, another section that got Democrats all excited. What is the Republican political strategy for dealing with the minimum wage?
I hope to move on to something else, I think. I mean, the other interesting part about this was the president made a very prominent appeal directly to business. It wasn't just appealing to Congress. He said, if you're an employer, you should raise the minimum. You should voluntarily raise the wages of your employees. And then he highlighted the pizza guy.
And Costco.
And Costco, yeah, Costco is part of it. I think that's actually sort of an admission that this Republican House is not passing an increase in the minimum wage. It's just not going to happen, at least this cycle. But it's a good political issue for Democrats. Republicans know it's a good political issue for Democrats. And I think they're going to say, look, the issue is jobs. The Republican answer here, the talking point is, I care about jobs. I don't care about wages as much. And my main priority here is getting more jobs. If you increase the minimum wage, you're going to have less jobs.
Okay, I want to show you one last bit from the president on the issue of health care, Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act. President took this on, as we said before, a little bit more directly than some of us expected in challenging Republicans and framing with a lot of the rhetoric he used in the presidential campaign about, as you'll see him say, not refighting, not relitigating what is already settled law. Let's listen to the president on that.
Now, I do not expect to convince my Republican friends on the merits of this law. But I know that the American people are not interested in refighting old battles. So again, if you have specific plans to cut costs, cover more people, increase choice, tell America what you do differently. Let's see if the numbers add up. But let's not have another 40-something votes to repeal a law that's already helping millions of Americans like Amanda.
Closing thought from you, Michael Scheer, about, again, going forward, the president's going to do some travel. We know in the next couple days to try to keep the momentum alive, as presidents do. As we like to say, what did he accomplish? How did he move things along with this speech in any way?
I think he reestablished himself as the leader he wants to be. I am not very optimistic on his behalf that a month, 3 months from now, this speech will have had much impact. I think the cycles we're in now, these things tend to get swamped very quickly. The challenge for Democrats and for the president will be to now find other excuses over the coming weeks and months to keep these messages out there in the public eye and to avoid the Republican messages.
Rana, as you said, nothing on tax reform, nothing on entitlement reform, but some economic proposals and some announcements of working with corporations. What do you see going forward?
I think the most hopeful thing is the idea about educational reform and really bringing together educators and businesses, job creators, making sure that we have the kind of skill set to really take advantage of the opportunities we have.
Okay. This concludes Time's historic first coverage of an anchored event, President Obama's State of the Union address. For more on the president's speech, all the reaction from around the United States, around the world, as well as analysis and the photos that Paul mentioned, you can check out time.com right this minute and all through the night and into tomorrow morning here in the East and around the world. But for now, that concludes this coverage. We appreciate you joining us. For all of us here from the Time Life Building on 6th Avenue in New York City, I'm Mark Halperin. Thanks again for joining us. Good night.